You don't make bad notes. The note next to the one you think is bad corrects the one in front. Miles Davis. I was watching an interview with Miles Davis on YouTube recently, and he said that quote, and he makes an excellent point in this, and it was so good that I thought I'm just going to make a little short video on this topic because this can be life-changing. Once you can understand what he's saying and apply it, it really can change the way that you think about music. And so his point is there are no bad notes. It's not the note that you play that can be right or wrong. It's the note that you play after it, or the notes that you play after it, that determine if the note that you played was right or wrong. So it's those notes that you play after that put the whole phrase in context. And I'm going to give some examples of that in a minute. But I just thought, man, it's so right. And it's actually very freeing if you know that there's nothing you can do on this fretboard. There's no note that I'm going to play that is going to be wrong. It's up to me to make it right. If it's not in key, if I'm playing a song out of key, I can correct that and make it sound like it was part of the original idea. And so your favorite artist, your favorite guitar hero, whoever that is good at this. That's how they get to that level, that sort of prodigy level. It's not that they don't make mistakes. Every single person out there makes a mistake. Probably in every song in a live performance, there's always a mistake that happens in there. But what makes some people better than others is how good they are at correcting that mistake and even making it sound like it was intentional. That's just a genius move. And that happens in speech a lot too. A lot of, when we're speaking, we're improvising. As I'm saying this, for example, I'm not reading a script. I have some ideas in my head, but I'm improvising the words that I put together. And so I'm making mistakes even as I do it, but I'm correcting it based on the next words that I say. Let me just give a quick example of this. So if I were to say to you, because music is so conversational anyway, but if I were to say to you, what's the weather going to be this afternoon? And you said to me, you. That was your response, you, Y-O-U. Well, that's wrong. It's almost like you didn't understand what I said, or you're speaking another language. It's very confusing. But if the response was you, and then there was a pause and you think about it and you say, you might want to bring a sweater because it's going to rain this afternoon. Well, now it makes perfect sense. And so the question of what's the weather going to be this afternoon, and that response, you might want to bring a sweater, that's a dialogue that makes sense. It's because you put it in context. The same thing happens in music. It's exactly the same. So what's the weather going to be this afternoon? If somebody says golf ball, that doesn't fit. But if you say golf ball-sized hail may fall and you might want to stay indoors, well, now it's in context and it totally makes sense. That's how you have to think about these mistakes that you're going to make. It's inevitable that you're going to make mistakes. Everybody does it. So when you're practicing, you need to also practice how you fix mistakes like that. And so that needs to be part of your practice. And I learned this a while ago as I'm playing along with a jam track or a record or whatever, and I make a mistake, I don't stop. I just keep going. I just keep pushing, just like there's an audience there. I kind of treat every little, even sitting around the house, playing music by myself, I still treat it as if there's somebody listening. And what would I do in that scenario? Because you're in a very different headspace when you're playing in front of people than you are when you're playing at home. So you need to treat playing at home and improvising at home the same as you would if you had an audience. So how do you correct those mistakes? Okay, so there's only 12 notes in music, well, in Western music anyway. And if I'm playing in the key of G, I've got chromatically from one G note all the way up to the other G note, an octave higher, I've got 12 steps in between. And I can make any of those 12 steps work as long as I put it in the right context. So some of those notes are not going to work if you just land on them, but if you play something after that, that is right, that is one of the notes in key, then it'll totally work and actually sound like it was all intentional. So of those 12 notes I just played, 7 of those 12 are notes from my G major scale. And I'm going to be using a song that's in the key of G, G major, here in just a minute to demonstrate this. But what I mean by that is I have all of those notes are absolutely going to work. You don't have to question them. They're going to fall perfectly in key because the song that we're going to be playing over is in the key of G. So that's 7 of the 12 notes that we don't have to worry about. Okay, so there's another note that I'm going to add to those 7 notes that's a safe note to play for the most part, especially when your ear gets tuned and you know how to use it, and that's the flat 7. So when I played that major scale, these are the scale degrees. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then we're back to 1, right? Well, you've got the flat 7. You can use that as well. So that's 8 of the 12 notes. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, flat 7, 7, and then we're back to 1. So that just means when I'm playing over a song in a major key like this, I can just drop in anywhere in the fretboard and I have pretty good odds that I'm going to be hitting a note that is in key and that works. Okay, so that takes care of 8 of the 12 notes, but what about those remaining 4 notes? Well, here's the good news on those. Now, there are notes that are going to sound terrible if you just play the note itself in key. But what's nice about that is with each of those 4 notes, I can slide it down 1 fret and it'll be in key, or I can slide it up 1 fret and it'll be in key. So what that means is when you're improvising, so if you get nothing else out of this video, get this point. When you're improvising, if you hit one of those bad notes, and your ear will tell you right away, it's like sour milk, it's very obvious. All you have to do to adjust is move up a fret or down a fret for any of those 4 notes, and it's going to put you right back on track. And now that's where you're going to have to start to use your ear and develop your ear to figure out, okay, I'm on track, but what note am I playing? Am I playing the 3rd of the scale? Am I playing the 5th? And you need to develop your ear to be able to understand where you are in context. And that's really not as difficult as you might think, because once you get in key, you're playing either the root, the 3rd, the 5th, the 7, maybe the flat 7. You're playing one of those familiar sounds anyway. And once you can kind of determine that and you know which string you're on, then you kind of know which scale position you're in. And so you're in one of the 5 patterns. And this to me goes all back to the CAGED system. CAGED is C-A-G-E-D. It's 5 shapes, 5 containers that live on the fretboard. And you can connect all your triads to those, major and minor. You can connect the 5 patterns of the minor pentatonic scale, the 5 patterns of the major pentatonic scale, the 5 positions of your major scale, of your Mixolydian scale, all of the modes. They're all grouped into these 5 different buckets. And so that's why it's important to me to understand the CAGED system and just get those 5 shapes. It's just 5. It's not like this infinite number. But once you can understand those shapes and how to do things with those shapes, you can really jump in anywhere and be able to, even if you hit a bad note, you can just move up 1 or move down 1 fret and be back in key. So when I talk about these shapes, if I'm playing out of the E shape, for example, this is a G chord using the E shape, I've got my minor pentatonic scale in that container. I've got my major pentatonic scale in that container. I've got my major scale. I've got my Mixolydian scale. So all of that stuff lives in this container, and I do that for each of the 5 shapes. And really, if you can play your major scale, your major and minor pentatonic scale, and your Mixolydian scale, and do that in each of the 5 positions, you've got pretty much everything you're going to need for improvising. I mean, I'm generalizing. I know if you want to get into jazz and get into other things, it can get a lot more complicated than that. But for most of us that are just doing roots and kind of soul music and blues and country and bluegrass, these are the scales that you're going to need to use for those. And so anyway, let me put on a jam track now, and I'll just demonstrate some of these notes so that you can hear the sounds. And I'll show you how you can hit a wrong note and just go up or down a fret and correct it and make it right. Okay, so I've got my jam track playing. This is the one I used in last week's lesson, so if that sounds familiar, that's why. But the song is in the key of G, and there's several chords in it. There's major chords, minor chords. I'm gonna play the G major scale just to show you that scale works over all of these chords. We're going to stay on 1 string just to make it easy to visualize and sort of hear what's going on. So check this out. That's my G major scale. And what's nice about this is, first of all, any of those notes work, and I can even hang out on a note. I can land on any of those notes and it's going to work. There's my 3rd. So I can start to sing with that major scale, knowing that that's in key. And so that makes it very easy to improvise using that scale. Now, what about that flat 7? I mentioned that as being sort of, so we know that that's 7 notes, right, in your major scale. That flat 7 is an 8th note that I mentioned that also kind of works. Now, in this case, the flat 7 over something pretty like this, the flat 7, just think blues when you think flat 7, but listen to this. Notice how quickly I wanted to jump off that note because it's a little too sour. Now in certain songs and certain kind of grooves, it would work a little better. But in this one where it's soft and pretty, I don't want to hang out there long, but it's kind of nice to throw in that little bit of salt as an ingredient. See, listen to that little slide into the flat 7, or you can bend into it. So that's the way to think about that flat 7. It's nice, it's bluesy, but a little goes a long way in something like this. Okay, so that's 8 of the 12 notes, right? What about those other 4? So listen to these. This 4th fret, 6th fret, listen to this. Sounds terrible. 6th fret, terrible. 9th fret, terrible. 11th fret, also terrible. Now those are your problematic notes, but remember what I said, you can slide up a fret and make it right, or you can slide down a fret and make it right for any of these. So let's start with this note. Listen to that little phrase. It's like, was that wrong? No, it sounded all right. Even though if I landed there, it's gonna totally clash, it's not gonna work. But as long as I correct it, right? So that bad note was okay. The same is true with the other ones. Listen to this one. It sounds bad, so you wouldn't want to land on that. But if I went, look at that, chromatically it works. I can use it as a little stepping stone between these 2 frets. I just wouldn't want to land on it. So that's what Miles Davis is getting at. It's not the note itself that says whether it's right or wrong, it's the notes you play after that determine the context. So that's my job then, as I'm learning to improvise, to take these bad notes, which I'm always gonna hit. Now I'm just staying on 1 string. What happens when you go across all 6 strings? Same thing, it's the same notes. They're just different, you're in different little patterns there. But it's my job then to get good at making phrases out of those bad notes. Now I'm coming across strings. Watch this. So with that one bad note, it sounded bad for only a second, but then when you hear I kept going up, it's like, oh, maybe that was part of the phrase. And that's kind of how you have to treat this. So just remember, when you're practicing and you're improvising, sitting around the house playing, you have to practice mistakes and how you deal with them. You have to practice correcting your mistakes because they're going to happen. They happen to everybody. And so when you're practicing, if you make a mistake, don't stop and like start all over. You're not learning anything. You have to practice pulling the car out of the ditch. You're going to fall asleep at the wheel at some point, and you have to learn how to get it out of the ditch. You don't just give up. Because when you get in front of an audience, which hopefully you'll have one at some point if you don't already, when you get in front of people, you need to know how to deal with those things and not just stop everybody. You can't do that. So practice that. Practice hearing the sounds of correcting the mistake. You're only 1 fret away from it. That's the good news. You're never farther than 1 fret. So that's how I like to think of it. And it gives me comfort because that means that I'm kind of safe no matter where I'm at on the fretboard. I can always get out of the ditch real quick by just going up or down a fret. And now the real trick then is once you get out of the ditch, you need to figure out, okay, where am I? Am I playing the 3rd? Am I playing the 5th? And then once you figure that out, you can kind of determine which scale position you're in, and then your fingers know how to do their little dance, and now you're back on track and everything's good. And it's not as hard as you think if you practice it. And in the beginning, it'll seem very foreign, but just practice it. I'm telling you, you need to get good at this skill. So that's what I have for this week's lesson. I actually don't have tablature. I don't have a song. This is really just a point that I wanted to get across, but I thought it was so powerful that it needed to have its own video for this week. Plus, I'm on vacation this week. I'm with my boys, and I just didn't have time to put together a song this week. So there will be one next week for sure. You know that I don't usually skip on that stuff. So leave a comment and let me know what you think of this lesson. And if you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, I would encourage you to do that. I put out new lessons like this every week. All right, we'll see you next week for something new.